The spectrogram didn't lie. I've spent 6 years analyzing wolf howls, bird calls, and the ultrasonic clicks of bats. I know what a fraudulent recording sounds like. The digital artifacts, the frequency gaps, the telltale signs of manipulation. What I was looking at on my screen at 2:47 a.m. that November night was none of those things. It was a voice. Not human, not quite animal. Something that existed in the narrow space between language and instinct, between consciousness and wilderness. My name is Dr. Elliot Hayes. I'm not a cryptozoologist, I'm a bioacoustics researcher. Or I was until I made the mistake of being honest. For 3 years, I worked as a lab assistant at the Pacific Northwest Ecological Research Station, a small facility tucked into the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, 90 miles northeast of Portland. We studied ecosystem health through acoustic monitoring, automated recorders scattered across 200 square miles of old-growth forest, collecting sound 24 hours a day. The recording came from Station 47, deep in the Wind River watershed. I should have deleted it immediately. The research station occupied a converted ranger cabin from the 1950s, all cedar logs and narrow windows that faced a clearing where Roosevelt elk sometimes grazed at dawn. There were 4 of us. Dr. Sarah Kimura, who ran the operation, Marcus Webb, our GIS specialist, Jenny Okonkwo, who handled field maintenance, and me, the night shift data processor. My job was simple: review the audio files uploaded automatically from our remote recording stations, tag wildlife vocalizations, flag anomalies, and archive everything to our database. 8 hours a night, 5 nights a week, mostly alone except for the hum of servers and the occasional visit from a curious raccoon at the window. The stations themselves were weatherproof boxes mounted on trees, each containing a microphone array, a solar panel, and a small computer that uploaded compressed audio files via satellite connection. We had 67 stations active that autumn, arranged in a grid pattern designed to capture the full acoustic signature of the forest ecosystem. Station 47 had been installed in August, 6 miles from the nearest trail, in a drainage thick with Sitka spruce and western hemlock. Jenny had hiked in with the equipment on her back, a 2-day trip that left her swearing she'd never volunteer for remote installation again. The station had been functioning normally, recording the usual symphony of varied thrushes, Pacific wrens, and the occasional territorial bark of a black bear. Until November 17th. The file was flagged automatically by our software because it contained vocalizations that didn't match any reference pattern in our database. This happened occasionally. Usually it meant a new bird species had wandered into range or someone's loose dog had gotten lost in the forest. I opened the file expecting nothing remarkable. The recording was from 3:42 a.m., during the dead hours when most wildlife is silent except for owls and the odd coyote. The initial 15 seconds were typical. The rustle of wind through branches, the distant trickle of water, the soft drip of condensation from the canopy. Then, a sharp exhalation, close to the microphone, heavy, deliberate. I adjusted my headphones and replayed it. The sound that followed was unlike anything in our reference library. It started low, almost subsonic, a rumbling that seemed to vibrate through the recording equipment itself. Then it rose, modulating through frequencies that suggested vocal cord structure, intentional breath control, awareness of acoustic properties. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a howl. It was closer to speech, but without the crisp consonants and vowel structures of human language. Instead, it rolled and pulsed, carrying emotional weight I couldn't name, urgency perhaps, or warning, or something that existed outside the vocabulary of human feeling. Duration, 11 seconds. I ran it through our analysis software. The spectrogram showed harmonic structures consistent with a mammalian larynx, but the fundamental frequency was wrong. Too deep for a human, too controlled for a bear, too complex for any known primate in North America. I played it 47 times that night. The sound had layers. In the background, barely audible, a second voice, higher pitched, responding, and underneath everything, the snap of a branch under significant weight. By dawn, I had documented everything: timestamps, frequency analysis, environmental conditions, equipment calibration data. I'd also done something I knew I shouldn't. I'd searched our archives for similar recordings. I found 3, all from Station 47, all within the previous 6 weeks, all deleted from the official database with a single notation: equipment malfunction, disregard. I didn't mention it to anyone that first week. Instead, I did what any researcher would do. I looked for patterns. The archived recordings, the ones marked as malfunctions, showed similar characteristics. Same fundamental frequency range, same harmonic complexity, all recorded between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., always on nights with no moon or heavy cloud cover. The vocalizations appeared in clusters, 2 or 3 events within a single night, then silence for days. Whoever had flagged them as malfunctions hadn't bothered to examine the actual data. They'd simply removed them from our active database and moved on. I began staying late after my shift, cross-referencing the audio files with other environmental data. Weather patterns, clear and cold. Wildlife activity, minimal. Human presence, none recorded within 5 miles. The Wind River drainage was particularly remote. No trails, no roads, just a tangle of old-growth forest, too steep and dense for recreational hiking. On November 23rd, Jenny mentioned something during one of her rare visits to the station. Station 47's been weird lately, she said, refilling her coffee mug. I checked it last month when I was doing the maintenance run. Found these arrangements. Arrangements? Sticks, branches, piled up around the base of the tree. Not random, like deliberately placed. Thought maybe it was kids messing around, but there's no way kids are hiking 6 miles into that drainage just to stack sticks. I asked if she'd taken photos. She had. 3 images on her phone showing what looked like a crude structure, almost like a lean-to built around the station's mounting tree. The branches were fresh, still showing green cambium where they'd been broken. Not cut broken with enough force to snap 6-inch diameter limbs. I cleared it away, Jenny said. Didn't want it interfering with the equipment. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When was this? October 19th. Why? October 19th was 2 days before the first deleted recording. That night I retrieved all the archived files from Station 47, not just the ones marked as malfunctions, but every recording going back to its installation. The pattern was clearer now. The vocalizations had started on October 21st, immediately after Jenny had dismantled the stick structure. They occurred every 3 to 7 days, always during the darkest hours, and they were getting closer to the microphone with each recording. The most recent one, the 11-second vocalization I'd first analyzed, had been recorded less than 6 feet from the equipment, close enough to hear breathing before and after the sound, close enough to hear what might have been knuckles dragging across bark. Dr. Kimura arrived the following Monday with news. We'd received additional funding for a winter survey of spotted owl populations. It meant expanding our recording network and hiring a graduate assistant for the season. She was pleased. The project was finally getting recognition. I asked her about the deleted files from Station 47. Her expression shifted. Not quite annoyance, but something guarded. Those were equipment errors, Elliot. Happen sometimes in remote installations. Moisture gets into the housing, creates audio artifacts. I analyze the files, they're not artifacts. Then they're contamination from local wildlife. Bears, probably. They get curious about the stations. These aren't bear vocalizations. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Concern. Not about the data. About me. Elliot, she said carefully, I need you to stay focused on the work we're funded to do. Spotted owls. Ecosystem health. Not whatever you think you're hearing on those recordings. She knew exactly what was on those files. She'd heard them before. I went to Station 47 myself on December 1st. It took me 9 hours to hike in, longer than it should have, but I was carrying recording equipment, camping gear, and enough supplies for 3 days. The trail disappeared after the first 2 miles, leaving me to navigate by GPS through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles. Moss-covered deadfall, hidden ravines, slopes that dropped away into nothing. The forest changed as I moved deeper. The trees grew larger, older, their trunks thick enough to hide a vehicle. Douglas firs that had been saplings when Lewis and Clark crossed the continent. The canopy closed overhead, turning midday into twilight. Sound behaved differently here, absorbed by the moss, muffled by the fog that clung to the understory like something living. I reached Station 47 at dusk and immediately understood why Jenny had been unsettled. The stick structure was back. Not just rebuilt, expanded. A semicircle of branches, some as thick as my thigh, arranged in a pattern that suggested both purpose and intelligence. They'd been woven together in places, braced against the mounting tree, creating a barrier between the station and the forest beyond. I didn't touch it. Instead, I set up my tent 50 yards away, near a small creek where the sound of running water might mask my presence. I rigged my own recording equipment, a parabolic microphone and a digital recorder with 48 hours of battery life. and pointed it toward the station. Then I waited. The first night was uneventful. The forest performed its usual nocturnal symphony. The bounce of a saw-whet owl, the rustle of flying squirrels, the distant crack of a tree settling in the cold. I dozed in my tent, jerking awake at every sound, checking my recorder every hour. The second night, something changed. It started at 3:17 a.m. I know because I was awake, staring at the luminous dial of my watch, trying to convince myself that the shape I'd seen moving between the trees was just fog condensing in the cold. The vocalization came from less than 20 yards away. It was deeper than the recorded version, richer with overtones that seemed to resonate in my chest cavity. Not a roar, not a scream, something that carried meaning without words. A question perhaps, or a warning, or simply acknowledgement that I was there, that I'd been noticed, that my presence had been weighed and considered. My hands were shaking too badly to reach for the recorder. I could only listen. The sound rose and fell, modulating through frequencies that felt deliberate, structured, almost conversational. And then, impossibly, another voice answered from the opposite direction. Higher, shorter duration, but following the same acoustic pattern. Communication. Actual communication. I forced myself to move. I grabbed the parabolic microphone, aimed it toward the sound, and pressed record. Silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of held breath. The entire forest had stopped. No insects, no small mammals, no wind. Just pressure, like the air before a lightning strike. I heard it then. Footsteps. Not the four-legged gait of a bear or cougar. Bipedal. Deliberate. The crack of branches under weight that suggested something large moving through the understory with surprising care. I stayed frozen as the sound circled my position, first to my left, then behind me, then to my right, maintaining a consistent distance of perhaps 30 feet. It was assessing me, deciding what I was and whether I posed a threat. Then it was gone. No crash through the forest. No sudden flight. Just absence. When I checked my recorder at dawn, I had 17 minutes of audio. The vocalizations were clear, unmistakable, undeniable. I had proof. I didn't tell Dr. Kimura immediately. Instead, I spent the next week analyzing the recordings with the kind of obsessive detail that probably should have worried me. I cross-referenced the vocalizations with every known primate database: gorillas, chimps, orangutans, bonobos. I compared them to bear vocalizations, wolf howls, and even the documented sounds of Siberian tigers. Nothing matched. The acoustic signature was unique. The fundamental frequency ranged from 80 Hz to 240 Hz, lower than typical human speech, higher than most bear vocalizations. The harmonics suggested a vocal tract roughly 30% longer than a human's, with cavity resonances that indicated significant size and power. Most striking was the temporal patterning. The vocalizations showed clear turn-taking behavior, with consistent intervals between calls that suggested intentional communication, rather than random animal sounds. I prepared a technical report, 15 pages, conservative language, no speculation, just data, spectrograms, frequency analysis, temporal patterns, environmental conditions. I included the recordings as supplementary files, carefully edited to remove any sounds that might be attributed to equipment interference. The question wasn't whether the data was valid. It was what to do with it. Publishing would mean scrutiny. From the scientific community, yes, but also from the public. The Pacific Northwest had a complicated relationship with Bigfoot claims. Every year, someone released a blurry photo or a suspicious video, and every year serious researchers had to distance themselves from the circus. Our research station survived on federal grants and university partnerships. Association with cryptozoology, even tangentially, could be catastrophic for funding. But the alternative was silence, sitting on data that might represent one of the most significant biological discoveries in a century. Data that suggested a population of unknown hominids living in the last wild places of North America, communicating in the darkness, building structures, exhibiting behaviors that indicated not just intelligence, but culture. I showed the report to Marcus first. He was the most pragmatic member of our team, a data guy, someone who lived in spreadsheets and GIS layers, who wouldn't be swayed by emotion or imagination. He listened to the recordings 3 times, examined the spectrograms, read through my analysis without speaking. Finally, "This is career suicide, Elliot. Is the analysis wrong?" The analysis is impeccable. That's the problem. He leaned back in his chair, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. You're asking me to believe that there's a population of undiscovered primates in one of the most heavily studied forests in North America, that no one has found remains, scat, hair samples, or anything else that would constitute physical evidence, that they've managed to avoid detection by wildlife cameras, hikers, hunters, and researchers for decades. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm showing you data. Data that will be dismissed as audio contamination by 99% of the scientific community. And the 1% that takes it seriously? They're the people who think they've found Noah's Ark on satellite imagery. He was right, of course. Publication in a mainstream journal would be nearly impossible. The peer review process would be brutal. Even if I found a journal willing to consider it, the media attention would be overwhelming. Our research station would become a destination for every cryptid hunter and conspiracy theorist in the country. Dr. Kimura would be forced to disavow the work to protect the station's credibility. What if we're wrong to stay silent? I asked. What if this is real, and we hide it because it's inconvenient? Marcus handed back the report. Then you need to decide what's more important, your career or your conscience. I submitted the paper to the Journal of Mammalogy on December 15th. The rejection came back in 72 hours, the fastest peer review I'd ever experienced. The editor's note was brief. While the technical analysis is competent, the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Audio recordings alone without physical specimens, DNA samples, or photographic documentation are insufficient to warrant publication. We suggest the authors consider whether environmental factors or equipment limitations might better explain these anomalies. In academic language, this translated to, we think you're either mistaken or lying, and we don't want to waste anyone's time figuring out which. I tried 3 more journals over the next 2 weeks. 2 rejected without review. The third sent it to peer reviewers who returned comments that ranged from dismissive to openly hostile. One reviewer suggested I seek professional consultation regarding appropriate research methodology and perhaps personal wellness. Dr. Kimura called me into her office on January 9th. I heard you've been submitting papers without institutional affiliation, she said. Her voice was measured, but there was an edge beneath it. Papers about unusual vocalizations from our recording stations. I'd submitted under my own name only, specifically to avoid connecting the research to the station. Someone had connected the dots anyway. The data is solid, I said. I don't doubt your data, Elliot. I doubt your judgment. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen, an email from our primary funding source, the National Science Foundation, asking for clarification about allegations of pseudoscientific research being conducted at NSF-funded facilities. You've put the entire project at risk. 3 years of ecosystem research, 5 PhD students, 67 recording stations monitoring some of the last old-growth forest in the continental United States. All of it threatened because you decided to chase something that doesn't exist. You've heard the recordings, I said. You know what's on them. Her expression didn't change. I know what you think is on them. I also know that confirmation bias is a powerful thing. You want to believe you've discovered something extraordinary, so you interpret ambiguous data in a way that supports that belief. It's not malicious. It's just human. Play the recordings again. Actually listen to them. I have listened to them, Elliot, multiple times. And what I hear is a complex acoustic environment being filtered through equipment that was designed to record bird calls, not whatever you think you're documenting. Throw in some low-frequency interference, add environmental factors we don't fully understand, and you get anomalies. Strange sounds. But strange doesn't mean unknown primate. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made in person, the one from 50 yards away, captured on my own equipment, not the station's. The vocalization filled the small office. Deep, modulated, unmistakably purposeful. Dr. Kimura listened without expression. When it finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Even if, and I mean if, those sounds are being made by something unknown, have you considered what happens next? Publication leads to attention. Attention leads to expeditions. Expeditions lead to exploitation. You're not talking about discovering a new species of shrew, Elliot. You're talking about revealing the existence of something that has survived precisely because it's remained hidden. So we protect them by pretending they don't exist? We protect them by leaving them alone, by not painting a target on the last truly wild places in this forest, by understanding that some knowledge, once released, can't be contained or controlled. She stood, signaling the conversation was over. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Pending review of your conduct and compliance with research protocols. I was escorted from the building that afternoon. The story broke on January 24th. I don't know who leaked it. Maybe one of the journal reviewers, maybe someone from the NSF. Maybe someone at the research station who thought the public deserved to know. Whatever the source, a journalist from Portland published an article titled, "Bigfoot Vocalization Recordings Prompt Government Research Station Investigation." The article was surprisingly balanced, laying out my credentials, the technical nature of the recordings, and the institutional response. It included quotes from Dr. Kimura emphasizing that no credible evidence supports claims of unknown primates in the region, and that I had been placed on leave for protocol violations unrelated to the content of any recordings. The internet, predictably, exploded. Within 48 hours, my email inbox contained 600 messages. Half were from true believers congratulating me on my bravery in exposing the truth. The other half were from skeptics calling me a fraud, an attention seeker, or worse. Several threatened violence if I continued spreading misinformation. 3 podcasts requested interviews. A documentary filmmaker wanted exclusive rights to my story. Someone created a Reddit thread analyzing my recordings that generated 4,000 comments in 6 hours. A group calling themselves the Cascade Cryptid Collective announced they were organizing an expedition to Station 47 to document the truth the government doesn't want us to know. They posted coordinates pulled from metadata in one of the leaked audio files. Within a week, over 100 people were planning to hike into the Wind River drainage, a remote wilderness that averaged 2 visitors per year. The Forest Service issued a statement discouraging travel to the area due to hazardous winter conditions and sensitive ecological research zones. This naturally convinced the conspiracy-minded that there was a cover-up underway, which only increased interest. Dr. Kimura was forced to hold a press conference. She stood in front of the research station, flanked by university officials and a Forest Service representative, and calmly explained that acoustic anomalies were common in complex forest environments, that equipment limitations could create misleading data, and that there was no evidence, physical, photographic, or otherwise, supporting the existence of unknown primates in the Pacific Northwest. When a reporter asked about the recording specifically, she said, "What Dr. Hayes documented was likely a combination of bear vocalizations, environmental acoustics, and equipment artifacts. His interpretation, while well-intentioned, represents a misunderstanding of the data rather than a genuine discovery." I watched the press conference from my apartment, 15 miles away, feeling like I was witnessing my own professional execution. The scientific community was even less forgiving. Colleagues I'd worked with for years stopped returning my calls. My advisor from graduate school sent a brief email. "Very disappointed. Expected better from you." A former classmate published a blog post titled, "When Good Scientists Go Bad, a Case Study in Confirmation Bias." But the worst part was the effect on the forest itself. By February, the Wind River drainage was overrun. People with cameras and audio equipment trampling through the understory, setting up camps near Station 47, leaving trash and human waste and noise pollution throughout what had been pristine wilderness. The acoustic monitoring data from the region became useless, overwhelmed by human voices, footsteps, and the general cacophony of people convinced they were on the verge of history. The vocalizations stopped completely. Station 47 recorded nothing unusual for 3 weeks straight. Just the sounds of humans crashing through the forest, calling to each other, playing recordings of purported Bigfoot calls through portable speakers. Whatever had been there, whatever I'd documented, was gone, and I had driven it away. I went back one final time in late February, not to Station 47. That area was ruined, at least temporarily. Instead, I hiked to a different drainage system, 8 miles north, in an area our recording network didn't cover. Places that remained truly remote, steep, dangerous, and uninviting enough that even the sudden influx of cryptid hunters avoided them. I carried no recording equipment this time. No cameras, no notepads, no scientific instruments, just camping gear and 3 days of supplies. I wasn't there to document anything. I was there to apologize, though I wasn't sure to what or to whom. The forest in that drainage felt older, more reserved. The trees were enormous. Western red cedars wider than I was tall, their bark hanging in long strips like ancient armor. The understory was thick with sword ferns and devil's club, creating a green twilight even at midday. It was the kind of place that made you aware of your own smallness, your brief and temporary presence in a landscape that operated on timescales measured in centuries. I set up camp near a spring, where water emerged from between rocks covered in moss so thick it looked like green velvet. That night I didn't try to stay awake. I didn't watch the forest or listen for sounds. I simply slept, exhausted by weeks of stress and public humiliation, and the growing certainty that I'd made a catastrophic mistake. I woke at dawn to find a branch propped against my tent, not placed there by wind, positioned deliberately, the broken end driven into the ground at an angle, the other end resting against the tent fly. A marker, a message. I understood then, in the way you sometimes understand dreams before you're fully conscious. I was being watched, had been watched all night. Whatever inhabited this forest had come close enough to touch my shelter, and had chosen to leave a sign rather than a threat. I sat outside my tent for an hour drinking instant coffee, looking at that branch. It was freshly broken. I could see where the cambium was still bright green. Snapped, not cut, placed, not dropped. I spoke aloud, feeling ridiculous but needing to say it. I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing. I won't come back. I won't publish anything more. I won't bring others here. The forest was silent. No birds, no wind, just that profound stillness that suggested something listening. I packed my gear and hiked out that morning instead of staying the planned 3 days. On my way down the ridge, I passed through a small clearing where the canopy opened enough to let in full sunlight. In the soft earth at the clearing's edge, a print. Not a bear, not a human. Something else. It was deeply impressed into the mud. Whatever made it was heavy. The proportions were wrong for any primate I knew. Too wide, too long, with a flexibility in the arch that suggested both bipedal locomotion and something adapted to forest terrain. It was surrounded by smaller prints, overlapping, suggesting multiple individuals. A family group, perhaps, or a community. I took no photos, made no measurements. I simply looked at it for a long moment, committing it to memory, then covered it with fallen leaves and continued down the mountain. Some evidence doesn't need to be collected. Some truths don't need to be proven. The knowledge that they existed was enough. I never returned to the research station. The administrative review concluded that I had violated research protocols by publishing data without institutional approval and by conducting field work outside my authorized scope. Dr. Kimura could have had me formally censured or reported to academic ethics boards. Instead, she simply let my contract expire without renewal. I took a job with a private environmental consulting firm in Olympia. Routine work, surveying development sites for endangered species, writing reports that no one reads carefully. It pays well enough. It keeps me employed. It's about as far from groundbreaking research as you can get while still calling yourself a scientist. The media attention faded quickly. Within 2 months, the story was forgotten, replaced by newer scandals and more dramatic claims. The cryptid hunters moved on to other sites, other rumors, other forests they could invade and disturb. The Wind River drainage slowly recovered its silence. I still monitor the data from Station 47, though I no longer have official access. Marcus sends me files occasionally, quietly, without comment. Just raw audio dumps that I analyze in my spare time on my own equipment. The vocalizations haven't returned. Whatever was there has moved deeper into the forest, into places we haven't yet filled with roads and recording equipment and human certainty. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, if Dr. Kimura was right, and I fell victim to confirmation bias, to wishful thinking, to the human need to believe we haven't completely mapped and cataloged and conquered every corner of the world. The recordings are real. I still have them, backed up in 3 different locations. But recordings can be misinterpreted. Context can be misunderstood. But then I think about that footprint, the branch propped against my tent, the silence that fell over the forest when something large and aware moved through the darkness just beyond my vision. I think about the ethical question that no one wants to ask. If they exist, and if we prove they exist, what happens next? Protection, maybe, under the Endangered Species Act, habitat preservation, scientific study, or exploitation, trophy hunting, forced relocation, the gradual colonization of their last refuges by people like me, armed with good intentions and data collection protocols. Maybe Dr. Kimura understood something I didn't, that discovery and destruction are sometimes the same act. that by revealing their existence I would have removed the very thing that kept them safe, their implausibility. The fact that most people didn't believe they existed was their greatest protection. I carry that weight now. The knowledge that I came close to exposing something that had survived for thousands of years specifically because it remained hidden. The understanding that my desire for validation, for scientific recognition, for proof that I wasn't crazy, would have sentenced them to the kind of suffocating attention that destroys everything it touches. On clear nights, when I'm home alone in my apartment, I sometimes play the recordings, just for myself, that deep modulated vocalization, carrying meaning I'll never fully understand. The response from the second voice, higher and more urgent. The sound of something moving through darkness with purpose and awareness. They're still out there, in the places between our maps, in the forests too steep or too remote or too uncomfortable for most people to visit, living their lives parallel to ours, speaking their language in the hours we're not listening. And that's exactly where they should stay. Some secrets of the forest aren't discovered. They're entrusted to those who learn, finally, to keep silent.